este gran evento. La verdad es que estoy muy orgulloso de todo el trabajo que hemos hecho también en muchas diferentes empresas, partes, para que esto sea posible, ¿no? Y la verdad es que me enorgullece mucho el ver toda esta gente, muchas caras conocidas, que entre todos el mensaje es que yo creo que entre todos estamos construyendo la industria, ¿no? Bueno, una pequeña presentación. ¿Por qué estamos aquí? Como decía, es un evento muy importante, es el primer evento que hacemos en España de la mano de HTC Vive X, justamente enfocado en inversión, en el crecimiento de startups que ya se están generando en España, pero que aún queda mucho por hacer, ¿no? Una breve presentación de quién soy yo y qué es lo que hacemos. Yo soy Carlos López, que soy fundador de Oarsis. Es un venture builder, es una especie de incubadora donde sacamos startups enfocadas en realidad virtual y realidad aumentada. Llevamos haciendo esto 2 años, hemos lanzado 7 proyectos, pero esto es solo el comienzo y tenemos una ambición mucho más grande, ¿no? Y estos son un poco los proyectos que o bien hemos lanzado o bien hemos invertido, algunos que no han funcionado. De momento, bueno, en diferentes ámbitos, ¿no? Tanto realidad virtual aumentada, Remote Eye, Virtua Flow. Hicimos unas pequeñas inversiones en realidad virtual Maibrana y Hierbabuena, que tenemos por ahí también a Héctor, que ahora lo conoceréis. ¿Se me oye bien o vale, genial? Y luego ahora mismo que estamos trabajando en 4 proyectos y alguno más que anunciaremos a partir de septiembre, ¿no? De aprendizaje de idiomas, de temas de relajación y demás. Igualmente hacemos cursos de formación para el que se quiera formar o conozca a alguna persona que se quiera formar en temas de desarrollo de VR con Unreal Engine o, por otra parte, desarrollo de aplicaciones nativas con ARKit. Estos los empezamos justo la semana que viene. Y luego también anunciar un evento que vamos a hacer en septiembre, y es algo en lo que estamos trabajando. Y básicamente es un ejercicio que estamos haciendo más o menos un par de veces al año, y es plasmar una foto del ecosistema de empresas de VRR en España. Y esto la verdad es que nos ha causado muchas sorpresas, en el sentido que ha habido, sobre todo el año pasado, hubo una cantidad enorme de empresas que se metieron en este sector, que se crearon nuevas, sobre todo más en la parte de estudios o agencias. Pero cada vez más vemos empresas, que es un poco el foco también de esta sesión, empresas más enfocadas en producto, en diferentes verticales o directamente en la industria de la VRAR, ¿no? Que es la parte superior del infográfico. Esto lo anunciaremos, es un evento que vamos a hacer en septiembre. Aquí hago una llamada también porque esto no está actualizado. Algunos logos los veréis por ahí que todavía habría que actualizarlo. Es un poco una llamada también para los que os queráis incluir en el infográfico o queréis hacer alguna actualización, decíroslo y actualizaremos y publicaremos digamos, la foto final en septiembre. Y luego también recomendaciones de categorización. Estamos muy abiertos, la verdad es que es un quebradero de cabeza, pero lo hemos intentado de la mejor manera posible. Y luego recordaros, bueno, el evento es básicamente una presentación de HTC Vive X, luego tendremos un panel, como veis en el evento, tendremos un catering también justo aquí, que lo pondremos justo en la parte de arriba, y luego para aquellos que queráis ver el partido tenemos un espacio reservado que es justo aquí en el Parque de Atenas. De todas formas, en principio, el catering, la comida, cervecitas, la haremos aquí y luego os avisaremos para quien quiera continuar con nosotros viendo el partido justo a 2 minutos a pie. Así que sin más, me complace presentaros 2 grandes personas que están moviendo mucho, tanto en España como en Europa, el ecosistema de VR-AR, ¿no? Ellos son Antonio Tallon, por un lado, responsable de HTC en España, y por otra parte Dave Haynes, responsable director de HTC Vive X en Europa, que os van a contar durante estos próximos minutos un poco qué es lo que hacen y el objetivo de Vive X para hacer crecer toda esta industria de la VR. Así que, sin más, un aplauso para ellos.
Pero yo no lo necesito, lo dejo todo. Bueno, buenas tardes a todos. Prometo que no me voy a extender para que el partido se intente respetar. En primer lugar, presentarme para el que no me conozca, Antonio Tallon, responsable de HTC Vive en España. Lo de Muñoz es prácticamente una anécdota que ha ido desapareciendo, ya prácticamente todo el mundo me conoce como Antonio Tallon. Así que un placer estar aquí, realmente dar las gracias a Oarsis, a Google Campus por hospedarnos aquí. Son unos partners excelentes y la verdad es que lo que queríamos era crear industria, crear familia, estar con vosotros y hacer más amigos. Queríamos conocer a más gente en estos momentos tan importantes para nosotros. Y es que realmente este año 2018 es un momento clave. Y la verdad es que una semana, bueno, pues de tantas noticias, de urdangarines, de huertas, de lopeteguis. Creo que la gran noticia para nosotros es que Vive X viene a Europa y de la mano de Dave Haynes, que se va a encargar de liderar este proyecto para nosotros. Y creo que es un momento clave. Y creo que es verdad que Europa ha llegado un poco tarde al carro de Vive X, pero creo que lo hacemos en el momento adecuado. Justo ahora que la industria está realmente madurando, en el que ha pasado quizá la fase inicial de, digamos, sobreexcitación, y estamos llegando a un momento en el que la industria está madura, los players están muy definidos, hay un producto que ya realmente alcanza las expectativas del cliente y marca una tendencia hacia dónde vamos a ir, y en el que ya no hablamos de pequeños pilotos y experimentos que ocurren aquí y allá, sino que hablamos de grandes despliegues, de grandes proyectos y en los que la realidad virtual está realmente ayudando a esa transformación digital que conocemos. No me voy a extender mucho. Es verdad que para HTC esto es un poco un déjà vu, esta situación de ahora, ¿no? Yo llevo ya 11 años o más de 11 años en la casa, o sea que hemos vivido un ciclo parecido en el mundo de los smartphones, ¿no? En el que yo en el 2003 iba ya con una PDA de estas con GPRS, iba dándole ahí con el puntero a una pantalla resistiva y la gente me miraba un poco con cara de friki, ¿de dónde vas tú con esto? Pero es verdad que lo que aquello era una promesa tardó tiempo en transformarse en una realidad de consumo en el que mi madre lleva un smartphone, ¿no? Realmente hasta el 2009 que no llega WhatsApp no se convierte realmente en un fenómeno de masas y digamos que el desarrollo fue paulatino. Nosotros vemos lo que estamos percibiendo ahora mismo en la industria de la realidad virtual es un desarrollo incluso más rápido que el que vimos en smartphones, con sus altos y sus bajos, pero si miramos a la madurez del mercado es mucho más potente de la que veíamos en el 2004-2005 cuando empezábamos en todo esto. Y de hecho creo que lo importante de este proyecto es que no se trata de cuando mirábamos las PDAs en aquel entonces, esos smartphones ladrillacos, era un producto muy B2B. Tú hablabas con un Vodafone o con tal y solo lo vendían para empresas. Era un proyecto que prácticamente no tenía un ángulo para personas, digamos, particulares en aquel momento. Gracias a que la realidad virtual es un proyecto muy atractivo también para el consumidor final, estamos viendo una aceleración en el proceso de desarrollo importante. Todavía nos queda muchísimo por recorrer, pero creemos que estamos en el buen camino. Así que nada, nosotros siempre hemos predicado mucho el mensaje interno dentro de la casa de que España está lleno de talento, de muy buenas ideas, de gente con una capacidad de trabajo y de creatividad tremenda. Y ese es uno de los motivos por el que Dave está hoy aquí, para poder presentaros Vive X, un programa que tendrá su sede en Londres, pero que realmente creemos que va a ayudar a todo el ecosistema europeo. Es un programa internacional a lo largo de toda Europa y estamos realmente entusiasmados por ver todo el talento que viene desde España. Así que sin daros más la tabarra, voy a dar paso a Dave Haynes, que en perfecto inglés os va a ilustrar cuál es el plan en torno a Vive X en los próximos meses. Así que nada, muchas gracias y damos la bienvenida a Dave. Dave. Welcome.
Thank you. Cool. So when I woke up, I made a quick bet with myself of whether I should do this in Spanish or English, and English won. So first of all, apologies, but I love saying Vive X. That's the new. In Paris, it was Vive X, and now it's Vive X. Cool. So just a couple of thank yous. First of all, so thank you to Google Campus for hosting us. This is a very lovely space. So we're good to be here. I'm sure Carlos has already said, but we've got some demos set up. We've got a Vive Focus, a Vive Pro somewhere. So yeah, do stick around afterwards. But I'd also like to thank Veronica and Carlos from Oarsis, who have been working hard behind the scenes to make sure that the event actually happens. So I just want a big round of applause for these guys before going any further. All right, good stuff. So just while I look for the clicker, just quick show of hands. So here in the room here is a founder of a company in the VR AR space. Okay, so quite a few of you. Anyone here thinking about starting a company in the VR AR space, but not yet? Okay, excellent. And is anyone in the room thinking of actually applying for Vive X? Okay, a few of you. So that's really kind of the main thrust of today, is to tell you a bit more about what the Vive X program is and what it isn't. Cool. So hopefully a lot of you know this already, but Vive X started about halfway through 2016, and it started as a $100 million program to invest into the VR AR ecosystem. So it's a global accelerator or a global program. But you know, this was a real commitment from HTC to say, you know, we want to see more applications, more companies, more development And, that really helps everybody and not just HTC. So that's really, there's $100 million, that sounds like a lot of money, but really at the core of that, it's not about the money. It's really us trying to foster and cultivate the entire ecosystem. And that's led us over the course of the 2 years. We've had 3 programs that have run, and we've invested in over 80 companies now. So we've become the world's most active VR and AR investor. Hopefully other people will overtake us, but that's quite a sizable amount so far. And I say it's a global VR accelerator, and this is how I first knew it. My background was actually in venture, and I was really interested in the VR space. So when Vive X came along, it was like, oh, great, more people investing. But there's a big hole here. I mean, we have San Francisco, the heart of tech and VC. Asia, very important market, especially for you guys. We'd also opened up Tel Aviv to focus more on AR and AI stuff last year. But there's one really missing thing, an entire continent, which is Europe. So that's why I came on board to Vive, is to bring the Vive X program to Europe, because there's such a deep pool of talent and some really promising companies. We had actually made 6 investments in European companies. I think we have 1 in the room, Soccer Dreams. But they were going to other programs. So actually, if you don't want to apply for Vive X Europe, you can apply for San Francisco. If you're a big consumer company, that might be a better place. Or if you're doing hardware, it might be that Shenzhen's a better place. But we are a global team, so we do actually work quite closely together. So that is the good news. So now we've added Vive X London to all of the other programs. But you might be thinking, why show a picture of London when I maybe should be showing a picture of Madrid? Well, it just happens we're in London, so that's where the resource is to run the program. But this is in no way, this isn't an accelerator program where you have to come and relocate and be in the same office with people for 3 months. There will be points when we make the investment, and then later on when we do some investor day and more investor relations stuff, that you'll need to come to London to be quite close to us. But you can stay in Madrid, you can do, it's really up to you. This is Vive X London, but it's open for all companies across Europe. Okay, so big question I always get, and this is something that I'm hoping to speak to a lot of you guys about, is what are we actually looking for in Vive X? Well, we've invested across a lot of sectors. It's really ranged. It's gone from analytics for VR to social platforms through to brain-computer interfaces. So it's really been, whether it's B2C, B2B, it's really, there's not many things that we haven't actually backed so far. But for Vive X in Europe, and this isn't our exclusive focus, but in Vive X in Europe, we think and we anticipate that we'll have applications from really strong talent that are doing stuff in B2B and enterprise. So that could be construction, it could be design, education. I think there's a lot of people doing stuff in professional training. So if you're not in these categories, don't worry. If you're in B2C, still apply, but we expect to see some great things in here. The one thing that I would say, whether it's B2B or B2C, is that your company, you already have a product in the market and you're ready to scale. So it might be that you've got that first proof of concept going with one customer. It might be that you've got 10 customers, but you now need to ramp up and deploy to 50. This isn't for if you're building your project and you still have 7 months before you come out of alpha. That might not be right, because what we're really focusing on with the Vive X program for now is you need to be ready to go so that Vive can really get the whole weight of the organization behind you and make you successful over the next 9 to 12 months. So we invest across lots of different sectors, lots of different categories. I think this is worth pointing out. We all speak about VR. There's a lot of VR headsets here. I'm sure a lot of you are working in VR, but at HTC, we really believe in what we call Vive Reality, which is the convergence of a number of technologies that are all coming together now to allow us to do things that we've never done before. And that's the convergence of VR, AR, AI, and 5G. One other thing that I should mention is blockchain. So I don't know if people saw, but we released the HTC Project Exodus, which is a blockchain-enabled phone. So we are also looking for stuff at blockchain, but I think these are really the core technologies that I'm expecting to find here in Europe. Okay, so maybe more importantly of what we are looking for is what we're not looking for. So, you know, when you run a program and say, hey, we have $100 million to invest, obviously that gets the attention of a lot of people. But Vive X is really just for focusing on startups that are products or platforms or tech that can scale. And maybe what it's not best suited for is stuff where it's a specific content play, or you're making a, you're making a game, or you're doing service work or agency work. Those are all really, really good businesses. So it's not that, it's not good enough to apply for Vive X, but it's really companies are expecting to scale quite rapidly. Get some investment from Vive X, maybe raise some more money, and be in the kind of the next Facebook or Instagram or Salesforce or Slack, but in the VR AR space. So if you're not in that category, don't worry. Still speak to us. I'll talk about a few other ways that Vive can help you, even if Vive X isn't necessarily relevant. And a lot of people are still kind of, actually, hang on, I'm doing this. If you've got any questions, also feel free to apply. It's actually quite a useful process to go through, and do come and find me afterwards to kind of ask any questions that you've got to clarify that. One thing that I am seeing is a lot of people are running what looks like a studio or an agency business on the inside, but actually they found a product that they now want to spin out and really scale, so that's also totally fine. Okay, so next question is, what stage does Vive X invest in? Well, we're very much an early stage investment. So, I mean, by definition, there aren't many late stage VR or AR companies in the market at the moment. But where Vive X really plays best is any companies up until the point where you've already kind of gone past Series A, but anything before. So if you haven't received funding, or if you've just got angel funding, or you're about to close a seed round, like all of those things are relevant for Vive X. One thing I would say again, in 2016, there weren't many VR companies, so not many people had funding. I think, Vive X is seeing a kind of slightly more mature company apply to Vive X now, so there's a bigger range. We've invested in companies that raise up to 10 million, so there's definitely some flex there in what we're looking for. For companies that are beyond that, if that applies to any of you guys, or maybe it will do in the future, Vive also has organized and funded something called the VR VCA, which is the Virtual Reality Venture Capital Alliance. And that's not just us putting our money, but it's us curating companies that are looking for later stage funding. And we have an alliance between many other VC funds, both in Asia and in the US. And this is something that we'll be looking to bring to Europe potentially later this year as well. So that's something either for now or for your future. For very later stage companies, there are some interesting things happening in China. We teamed up with some parts of the Chinese government to launch the Premier Fund, but that's probably not for anyone in the room. But if it is, come and find me and I can point you to someone who knows more. Okay, so I've talked a lot about money so far. One thing to say, if you're just applying for Vive X for the money, then might not be the right program for you. A really key thing to what we do is our value add approach. And what do I mean by that? So yes, we can invest in you, but we can also introduce you to other investors in 6 to 9 months' time. We now have a global network of VCs that we know want to invest in companies in this space. But it might also be product expertise. Again, we have a global organization of people who want to help Vive X companies. We have people like Antonio who can introduce you to Volkswagen or introduce you to your next customer, or can get feedback from them on your company. So there's many different people, both internal but also external people who are happy to act as mentors, or again, because you've been validated as being on Vive X program, people are much more willing to spend time with you because they know that HTC thinks you're a very good company. There is a program around this. I kind of don't like the word accelerator because there's a very kind of, people associate that with a very specific type of program. We're not quite that. We do work with you quite intensively for the first 6 months. So as I said, you'd probably be coming to London for the first week or two, and being very hands-on. After that, we do have some structured parts of the program. So there is a series of workshops and other elements that we'll do at specific times. But really, this is 6 months for you to get what you need from Vive at the beginning. And it doesn't just stop then. Hopefully Soccer Dreams can testify to this, but I'm still, we'll all hopefully still be helping him out with various different things. And so there is a nice kind of Vive X family and support ongoing for all of the founders. Aside from Vive X, there are many, I think a lot of people think of Vive as a hardware company, but we are doing a lot of things. It's about the whole ecosystem. So hopefully most of you are familiar with Viveport. That's really our kind of growing and much improving store and distribution platform for applications, not just games. There is Vive Studios, so anyone who's working on the content side, we do run 2 of our own in-house studios, but we do from time to time fund third-party projects. Just to set expectations, it's not like we're kind of handing out lots of free money to develop games, but there is the opportunity there, and I get a lot of questions about it, so I just want to flag it now as something that we are doing. But really, probably the biggest support that we can give you is the 80 founders who have kind of been there and done that, the people who have had to go out and raise money for their VR company or find their first customers or figure out how to build an awesome product. So you have a huge strength of support in the Vive X family. So if you want to join the family, what do you need to do? Well, obviously come and speak to me. I'm going to be around later on, well, at least until the football, in which case I might skip off and see you at the football. But next steps. We do have an application form. I would definitely recommend emailing me anyway. My email is dave_haynes@htc.com. I probably should have put it up in the slide, but it's dave_haynes@htc.com. But if you want to formally apply, there is an application form. Just Google Vive X and go through it. It's quite obvious. We'll be making investments over the summer, so we'll probably be looking at them in July, making investment decisions in August, and then officially the program is looking to start in September. So there you have it. Again, if you want to take a photo of that and just remind yourself, go to vivex.com and it'll be really obvious from there. So cool. So thank you. I'm going to now bring up some, we've got a really great selection of founders who have been there and done that for the panel. Hopefully you can get some learnings of that. And like I said, all of us, please stick around after the panel, after we've had questions, because we'd love to talk to you about your projects. Cool. Thank you. Right. If the panelists could come up.
Bueno, mientras que el panel se prepara, voy a aprovechar para hacer mi pequeño minuto publicitario, porque es verdad que yo sin un PowerPoint no soy nadie, me he puesto ahí a hablar y se me ha escapado alguna cosilla que quería comentaros. Básicamente, muy rápido, quería destacar que tenemos nuevos productos y que no todo el mundo los conoce, así que aprovecho y los resalto. Sabéis que hace un par de años lanzamos el Vive, un producto que marcó, digamos, una tendencia, pero a partir de ahí hemos seguido evolucionando y hemos lanzado este año, a principios de año, el Vive Pro como un visor únicamente, solo como una actualización para tu Vive que ya tenías. Pero recientemente, hace unas 3 semanas, hemos ya lanzado por fin el kit completo de Vive Pro. Este ya incluye las estaciones base 2.0 con SteamVR 2.0 que toda la industria estaba esperando, y lo resalto porque sé que mucha gente todavía no se ha enterado, y el motivo por el que no le ha llegado ese mensaje es porque hemos enfocado mucho el lanzamiento del Pro Full Kit a lo que es el mercado Enterprise. Entonces, si vais a nuestra página web, no lo vais a encontrar directamente allí destacado, sino que tenéis que entrar a la sección Enterprise y vais a ver que dentro de Vive Enterprise está ya el producto destacado. Así que 100 metros cuadrados de tracking area, yo creo que merece la pena probarlo. El producto ya está listo y ya podéis empezar a combinar múltiples estaciones base y hacer todo tipo de proyectos mucho más ambiciosos con el nuevo Vive Pro. Por último, destacar Vive Focus, que ya hemos anunciado que tras el lanzamiento exitoso en China va a llegar al mercado occidental, Estados Unidos y Europa a lo largo de este año, y ya podéis aplicar como desarrolladores a productos a través de nuestra página web. Ya en la página de desarrolladores el producto está disponible para ser adquirido y normalmente entregamos en 2-3 días. El producto se entrega al coste que no recuerdo exactamente cuál es, pero está ya disponible para su comercialización. Y último detalle a destacar, bueno, por un lado el sistema inalámbrico que todo el mundo está esperando, con una colaboración con Intel. El proyecto está ya muy finiquitado. Durante el verano, hacia finales de verano, tendremos este producto listo y comercializándose. Así que por fin tenemos la opción de eliminar el cable que tanto todos queremos. Así que muy entusiasmados con este proyecto. Y por último, y me voy a quitar de en medio que ya están preparados, para los que trabajen más el mundo enterprise, el mundo corporativo, el mundo B2B, hay algo que mucha gente estaba anticipando y queriendo, que era tener la posibilidad de cómo desplegar en un entorno enterprise un Vive sin tener que instalar en cada ordenador Steam con una cuenta de videojuegos y que mucha gente, responsables de IT de las empresas, suelen poner bastantes trabas a la hora de desplegar Steam, ¿no? Entonces, para resolver ese y otra serie de problemas en el mundo enterprise, lo que hemos hecho es desarrollar un proyecto que se llama el Enterprise Advantage Service, que básicamente consiste en una licencia comercial que, uno, te permite el uso del producto para fines comerciales, digamos, para utilización profesional. Incluye una garantía de 2 años ya completa para uso profesional, línea de atención al cliente dedicada y, sobre todo, y muy importante, como comento, un software que te permite desplegar Steam VR, es decir, solo el módulo para tener Steam, la parte de realidad virtual, en cualquier ordenador, sin necesidad de cuentas, sin necesidad de configurar por el aire. Se puede hacer offline, con un pendrive, lo instalas en cualquier ordenador y ya tienes el Vive configurado. Así que, bueno, por si no había llegado a todo el mundo el mensaje, quería resaltarlo y no interrumpo más el panel y os doy paso a continuación.
Genial. Muchísimas gracias, Antonio. Bueno, ahora sí, que yo creo que ahora es el momento que todos estamos esperando y el momento de sacar esos insights, ¿no? de todos los aprendizajes de founders de primer nivel que justo tenemos en esta mesa. Me gustaría empezar la mesa igual con unas pequeñas introducciones. Ya conocemos la historia de Dave. I'm going to be switching to English right now, so the part is going to be fully in English. So maybe hopefully, next one is going to be in Spanish though, Dave. All right, so maybe just a small introduction from each. So there you go first, Roberto.
Hi, hello, welcome everybody, and thank you for inviting me to this panel. It's exciting the new times in VR industry because there are hard times in the past, no? I'm Roberto Romero, former co-founder of Future Lighthouse. Some of you guys probably know what we did in the past. Now I have a new company. I am part of Virtual Voyagers, creating new video games for VR, AR, XR. I am game designer. I am working in the 3D industry for 18 years, more or less. And that's it. I closed Future Lighthouse in another way few months ago, and I will talk about that in this panel.
Okay, I am Héctor Prieto. I am the CEO of Yerba Buena VR. Thank you guys for taking me here. The date was very fortunate because I live in California, the Silicon Valley, and I'm starting my holiday, so I delay a little bit then for being here, and very happy of that. What we do in Yerba Buena is a software for streaming very high resolution of video, 360, maximum immersion, and in a couple of words, what we do is we apply maximum pixel density where you are looking at, and less pixel density where you are not looking at. And on doing so, as a consequence, we get like 4 times more quality for half the bandwidth. What makes us different is that we do this process in the cloud in real time, and that's very interesting for sports, for live sports events. We have the luxury of having a tennis player in our team, and thanks to that, we are doing Davis Cup and Madrid, the ATP circuit, and some other things. Now starting with soccer also, and yeah, and I invited for you to have a look of what we do. The quality, since we have HTC focus, the quality is incredible. So more than happy on that. Thank you. Oh, you.
Hola, sí, funciona. Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Andreu Bartolí y yo soy el CEO y fundador o cofundador de Soccer Dream. Y la visión que tenemos en Soccer Dream es ayudar a subir el nivel del fútbol en el mundo y ayudar a países, sobre todo como China y Estados Unidos, a que poco a poco vayan pues cerrando el gap que hay entre su nivel de fútbol y el europeo, ¿no? Entonces, para hacer esto, lo hacemos pues con la primera plataforma de entrenamiento para acelerar el aprendizaje de los aspectos tácticos. Oh, sorry, it was in English, ¿no? Sorry. So I was saying we want to raise the level of football in the world, and we'll do for that. We've built a training platform focusing on accelerating the tactics skills of the players, and we use VR for that. Why we use VR for that? Because thanks to that, we can bring the type of drills, training drills of the top clubs to anywhere in the world, plus the players, teammates, and opponents that participate in those drills are optimized to accelerate the learning of the user. Plus, they can train home. So if you combine all this, the speed of development of the tactical skills of the player is like 10 times faster than than just doing it in the field. And that when we apply that in China and the US, the evolution of the kids, because this is for academies, the evolution of the kids is much, much faster than regular evolution. So that's what we do. And well, basically that's it.
Yeah, and I've already introduced myself, but just to add some context for this panel, so kind of seen this from both sides, so both as an investor. So before HTC Vive, I worked at an early stage fund in London that was called Seed Camp, a 20 million euro fund that was investing across many different technologies, but that's where I fell in love with VR, invested in a company called the Wave VR, which is a social music platform. And actually prior to joining HTC, worked there for 6 months, and yeah, so I've seen the challenges of you know, both funding and also growing a VR company.
Excellent. So as you can see, great panel. And I will kick it off by asking one question, and it was exactly regarding challenges, right? So as per your experience in the industry, more or less like during the 4 last years, how do you see the challenges for startup founders? How have they evolved? What were the challenges before? What do you think the challenges are now, basically? If someone wants to start with it.
Okay. I think the biggest challenge of the startup, I don't think it has, in this particular aspect, maybe it has not changed that much in the last 2 years in regards to the virtual reality, which is making sure that the application we do of virtual reality has a reason to be, has a benefit. It's a solution for something beyond the technology, right? So in our case, is applied to football training, and in other cases, is applied to other things. But it's important that, and especially for investors, that they see a specific reason, a specific application, which is much beyond VR. And just you are using VR just because it's the best tool in order to achieve that specific benefit, rather than just because it's cool or it generates a wow effect or something.
For me, the biggest challenge for a startup is to have a non-smoke real business plan with the real metrics for the industry, because the virtual reality industry is not mature at this moment. 5 years ago was in the first steps, not and build a great talent team, but not to make a big bet at the first time. You need to make the right steps to design your product and make your business model thinking in okay, I love VR, I love things that we can do with this technology, but what people need and what people will buy in the near future for my business, not? And this is essentially what every startup needs to ask for himself, no? At the beginning for build his company, no?
Yeah, I would say when it specifically comes to talent, I think the biggest challenge here in Europe, maybe 2 years ago, it was maybe lack of or a shortage of talent, just because people need to develop the skills to transfer from the games industry to the VR industry and etc. I think the biggest challenge today is maybe just convincing the talent that there now is to take the leap of faith and join a startup. I think in the US, if you're in San Francisco, you have a number of people, you know, you go down drinking in a bar and it's the, you know, 35th engineer from Facebook who now owns a, you know, £2 million flat. So there's a culture of people wanting to join companies, take a pay cut, get incentivized by equity. In Europe, we don't really have that. So what I see is a lot of the talent is playing it safer in terms of not joining a startup. So they can go and get a job at a big agency, you know, crank out campaigns for specific brands, or, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that because that puts food on the table and pays the mortgages. But I think it's, yeah, being able to convince founders that, yes, you know, come to the company, we'll be able to raise money, you'll get paid a decent wage, and this will be a good step in your career. But I think as you see more companies, you know, raising money, I think that will kind of, you know, help things and help more people take a leap of faith.
For me, I would say that the biggest challenge is going to be financing the company. I mean, until the market is mature and the money from the project is going to take time. So my recommendation for you guys you're going to start is try to be very thin, very, very lean. I mean, no fat at all. That's important because getting the money from investors always take more time than expected. If I don't know how you are, if I can comment a little bit on our specific case. I mean, we are at the core of the Silicon Valley, so we said, look, that's money is easy. I mean, we go there to the bar, as you say, and you meet with the VCs, and the money is blah. But looks like that VR used to be very high in 2016, but now is blockchain and artificial intelligence in the Silicon Valley, it means. So in our case, being there has not been easy at all to get the funds from San Francisco. But on the contrary, because we are there, investors here in Europe have been very interested, acting as a bridge. So that has been very interesting. Mm-hmm. And I would say what you say is to have attachment to a vertical, having a very clear, I think is much better than to be generic VR. In our case, we are doing sport tech, and there is not that many people doing sport tech in VR. So then the differentiator is a little bit easier. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting insights. I guess then it's a combination of talent. Maybe we're talking about timing, fundraising challenges. So if you were today starting a new company, let's say in the space, the question was going to be, what are the two main areas that you would be focusing on in the sense of, so we discussed different things, funding, talent. It was really like two cores. What would you say like right now, that was, so what you mentioned was of the last years. What it would be like from today, the two main focuses to start a company. And I'm talking as well about bootstrapping, as I know many companies are working on services first before jumping into a product and so on. What do you guys think?
I have a romantic vision about that because I love entertainment. So my new company, I just founded a company 1 month ago. It's about gaming, about entertainment content, but it's also about education. And from the perspective of social VR. And X are social in the most of cases because the potential of these tools to create impact and to change the world starts in education, in my mind, no? And entertainment content should be educational content also. So for me, this is two main areas where if I have $1 million, I put my $1 million to create products, not content, for these two areas.
Well, I would say the first lesson is think big, but step by step, and put yourself on milestones, and don't go to the next one until you achieve the first one. So the business plan could be like very big and hiring people and so on, but I suggest let's validate any of the steps before you go into the following one. And focus on talent. I mean, nothing like having the right people from the beginning, because if you try to grow very quickly, it's very difficult to get the right people on that. So that would be my recommendation.
My recommendation would be, as you said, like the first one, to focus on the purpose of what you want to build. Because funding and talent and many other things are very important, but all that would be really dependent on the purpose. And I think that the purpose has to be something that you really think you can achieve 10 times better than anything which is on the market today. If you find that thing in which you think you can achieve 10 times better, and I'm saying 10 to make it big, but it can be 3 or 4 or 5, but much better than what it is in the market, then the idea is going to be very strong, and all the rest will follow a bit easier.
Yeah, I guess two things. I think first of all is just kind of really focusing on a problem that isn't already being addressed. Seeing a lot of applications for Vive X and talking to a lot of founders, there's certain very obvious applications of VR where I can now, I know 4 companies in Europe all tackling exactly the same problem, and there's probably one in the US that has, already raised, $5 million or something. So I think if you are looking, and the amount of times I'll ask the founder, so who's your closest competition? And they maybe name one person. I'm like, well, you haven't done your homework of, what is the competitive landscape and how are you solving this problem either better or differently? So yeah, and I think, look at professional training, very big category, probably room for 3 or 4 large companies in the space, but you've either got to be doing the big play and the one training platform to rule them all, or you're going to go and be the best health and safety or the best medical training or whatever it is. So really kind of understanding your positioning versus other players that are starting to emerge in the market, and then really focusing on your first customer segment and understanding how it grows from there, I think is important. If somebody gave me $1 million, I'm very interested in the productivity space. So, moving from, room scale, Vive Pro is being used a lot in the enterprise, but as soon as I have a Vive Focus and I've just got it on my desk, I can actually imagine being more productive in Excel in a headset, or doing pair programming with my colleagues in Eastern Europe, or whatever it is. So I think, yeah, productivity is a category that would probably have been too early 2 years ago, but now is maybe the time to start doing it.
Interesting. Link to that, maybe more generic in terms of market vision. So I was having a conversation the other day about the companies that started in '96, internet companies, when there was more or less like 50 million users connected, and there was more or less like they were spending like half an hour a day. The question is, how would you compare VR, AR? Are we in '96 in comparison to the internet? Are we still like in '94, a little bit earlier? What's your view in the sense of what's coming next and going beyond VR and talking more about maybe about mixed reality and how the market is evolving, and whether that it's included in your vision as a company?
Yeah, of course. We are in these years now. There is no the netscape for VR right now. We are building that, but because we are in the early days. Maybe we will be in a mature moment in 2-4 years from now, but we need more content, more application. There are 2 different markets. B2B is mature enough right now. You can do millions of bill in B2B business for industry or for advertisement or whatever. For the masses, for B2C content, we are not ready right now. We don't have the enough users based to sell any content about entertainment or whatever you're thinking about. So we are very early. Of course, if we look for the past in the first 4 years, there are a lot of companies that close right now are closing, like mine, for example, because I have this $1 million 3 years ago, and I make content when I don't need to make content. So the timing are wrong. It's important to be sure that you are focused in the things that matter in the right time.
I think so you asked for the status of the market, right? I think of course it's evolving, but I feel it's just still early stage, and I think that something we have to do, all of us who are in the VR, is to think on those ideas and those companies that can make that, in which VR can make a difference, right? So VR has something very unique, which is the amount of immersion, right? And there are things in which immersion can make the difference to what are happening today in the market. And we have to focus on that. That is what will accelerate really the virtual reality in particular, and other technologies like mixed reality and so on, if we focus on those aspects. That's why one of the one of the aspects that somebody mentioned here is about training, right? So training in VR can really be even better than real training in many aspects. And that's something that we can prove thanks to the technology, that we are improving how things are happening in the world thanks to virtual reality. If the industry focuses on those aspects, we will be doing many more things, and it will accelerate a lot more.
And I don't remember internet on the 94 and 96. Sorry for that, because the years I'm not very clear. But I do remember when you access internet through the modem, and then a number of times we were to the internet cafe, because not everybody could have an ADSL at home. So we are doing business in Japan now, and in Japan is much more evolved into the VR than Europe. Mainly, I think, not only because of the technology, but because of the mentality of the people. And it was interesting for me to visit the VR zones, that is like entertainment centers, where there is a queue of 90 minutes to enjoy a VR experience with a Vive or something like that. So in some way, I think that are these kind of venues or this kind of brand activations, like the one we did for Mutua Madrid for the tennis, that is, let's say, creating the awareness in the public. Probably today there is no million of headsets at home, but in this kind of location-based VR centers, I think it's going to be like the place where the awareness will be created, like was Internet Cafe. I don't remember in 96 or 94 or 90.
Linked to that, I think it's very interesting your position, as you all have worked in international projects, right? Or you work either directly for Oculus with different productions at Future Lighthouse, so you have experienced different markets. As Héctor mentioned, you have presence in Japan. Soccer Dream, you were a certain amount of time in China, right? Where soccer is quite big. The question is, what is needed for European customers to kind of and users to get the market to that point? Is it cultural, or as we were stating, what are the differences in between markets? And is it really a good idea to start a company in Europe, and why in comparison to other places? Right?
Well, I would say go big, go global, or not do it. And don't be afraid of being out of there, because you will learn a lot, and you will see in some other visions. I don't think domestic markets like Spain or Italy are big enough for that, and I propose you guys who are starting be open to be outside and to be global. Being global not mean to do everything at the same time, but not be afraid to be in China or in other places. No, well, in China I'm afraid of, but don't be afraid of being out of there. It's I mean, Europe is small.
Yes, China is complicated, little bit. So, but what European needs? So, European needs the effort of the industry to put here next to us the tools, the hardware, and the standards in the whole industry. We need that in the same way that for example, Oculus have in libraries in the United States hardware to watch content. HTC in Europe, you can buy HTC in any store in Madrid, in a lot of stores in Madrid. We need to have all the hardware. We need the collaboration between the different brands, no? The manufacturers of hardware, and to put close together to create standards to the developers, to have the right tools to create the content for everyone, and to create this mass market. That is one of the keys for the future of immersive content. I not only speak about VR, because for me, in the next decade, we will assist a really great moment with the AR glasses in the market, where you can fusion the virtual reality and the augmented reality in the same device, and probably it will substitute your smartphone, and it's a wearable that you will wear every day, not at every time. And we need to create these standards. We need to create. We don't need to be afraid to get outside our comfort zone. Go to the US, go to the China, Asia, or every country to tener cara. So, when you are talking with any company in the world, when you are talking with the HTC guys, hey guys, I need your help. I need your technical guys to help me to develop that, or I need money, or I need a developer kits, please. People say me, hey, why you have the bifocus? Because I say, hey, I need one, please. It's easy, but you need to say, these guys don't know if you need the hardware. So if you have an idea, if you have a project, you can go ahead and say, hey, help me. No.
The wall is not so far as sometimes we think.
So I think that for startups, if you are a B2C startup, it's not probably that relevant where you are based, because at the end the platforms are global. So you can, if you do good content and you want to sell it to China or the States, you can do it through the global platforms like Viveport. And even if you are in a program like Vive X, for instance, you can ask them to help you on the promotion of that, and that works really well. On the other side, if you are in the B2B space, I think you have to be at the place where your customers are, because there's a lot of trust to be built with companies that are going to buy you and these type of things. The good side of B2B, though, is that it doesn't depend on the penetration of VR in the market, because if you demonstrate there's a need, that you have a solution to the need that that company has, then they would buy your solution regardless it is VR, it is AR, or whatever it is. So that's another advantage of B2B.
Yeah, when it comes to location, I mean, I think if you're doing B2C, you can totally do that from Europe. I mean, if you look at some of the big companies, you know, a Spotify or a SoundCloud, you know, there's been some very big B2C companies that are born here. But I think you still need to think about how do you expand your presence in the US? Because if you're doing consumer VR now, then you probably need quite a lot of funding to bridge to the point where we see consumer adoption. So, and again, this was the same with SoundCloud. You know, we had to go and we set up an office quite early in San Francisco, because a US investor wouldn't invest in SoundCloud until we had a US office, because your investors also want proximity, right? You know, if you're going to have a board meeting, you know, and you've got a San Francisco investor, they don't want to fly to, you know, Madrid every time they've got to do a monthly board meeting. So I think, yeah, in terms of actually reaching your customer, you can be anywhere, but and again, I think this is something that Vive X can help. You know, you might raise your first round here, but you're probably going to look to raise a Series A, or at least have somebody in your Series A syndicate that is a bridge to the US market. And then, yeah, I think when it comes to B2B, I think what's interesting is you can address large companies here in Spain. Like you can, or you know, you can sell into somebody in Volkswagen or somebody in X company. And what we're seeing is it gets picked up by one department, But we're now in this kind of deployment phase where it's, come out of the innovation teams and it's all of a sudden, oh, actually, we want to scale this to our Singapore team and we want to scale this to, because, VR is very collaborative, so it actually works very well across. So I think, if you are doing B2B, maybe you find you need to figure out what's your beachhead and how do you go from there. And I think the founders that are picking that smartly, because you have very limited resources, think about that, okay, how do you bridge from market to market?
That was one of my next questions. Is a great transition in the sense on focusing on B2B solutions, right? There is normally they are not the SMEs who are buying into it. Normally they are like mid-size, maybe companies that are have the capability, or as per my perception, they have the capability to innovate with VR AR. What is the fastest path to the cash, in the sense of the fastest path to the sale, noting that you have to talk to the right person? How do you identify those believers, and how is a B2B process to be executed properly? It's not an easy question.
Yeah, it's not an easy. And it's not that easy, and every morning we ask that, right? we wake up and say, what I have to do to be this quick path into cash. In our case, we are working in the sport environment. So we decided, let's go the closest possible to the owners of the rights, or even let's go the closest possible to those who are going to influence into the rights. So we are doing things that are visible, like this Davis Cup or Madrid, and probably is not the more efficient project in terms of money, because it's not, let's say, scalable or big or wherever, but it's a very good PR. It's a very good, let's say, visibility. So probably the closest path to cash is being visible. So that's at least what we are trying to do.
Have a good PR agency. And HTC Vive X behind.
You are your own PR if you are, let's say, doing projects that are visible. Let's say projects that are visible.
Well, for me, I could spend 700,000 euros in content, because I generate more than 3 million in B2B market with VR in 3 years, not? So it's important to focus in what are the people that needs VR products in this time, no? 3 years ago was the marketing agencies or the brands or education, museums, and are projects that you can monetize very quick, and you can get a cash in with these projects. And these benefits can be used for different purposes, to create other products or create content or whatever.
Yeah, I think, B2B is a challenging, sale, whether you're doing software or VR or whatever it is. I think the additional challenge in VR is you can get wrong signals from people you think are buyers. So I see a lot of companies who send me their fundraising decks, and they've always got the slide at the end which says traction, and they've got 12 different logos or maybe 2 logos, and you get three questions in to tell me about that project or that customer. And sometimes it usually starts off as somebody in the innovation team, and then they pass it on, but and that is usually a path at the moment, and it has been, so it's a very valid one. But the challenge is when you delude yourself, or you spend too much time when it isn't the innovation guy who does pass it on, when he's just ticking a box, like he's gone to a VR conference because he's interested in the technology, and you exchange emails. I think people spin their wheels a lot on people who aren't really qualified customers. And from there, I think it's them really understanding, and this is for any B2B sale, but understanding it's not just this person that makes the decision. There's 4 other people. So this guy might have found the solution, but then he has to go to his IT guy and say, well, now I found the solution, how do I deploy it? And hopefully that's where Vive Enterprise comes in, because we make deployment very easy for IT teams. But then he's also got to speak to his boss and the person in Asia who's using a different solution. So yeah, oftentimes it's a very complex sale. So it's just being efficient with that process and understanding at all times who you're speaking to and what problem are you solving for them? And hopefully you're not solving the problem of making the guy look good because he's just wrote some blog piece on VR. So.
It's a great piece of advice. Andreu, go for it.
I think that before you start getting the revenues or to start selling to customers, you have to show some success cases, right? So I would start by getting the first initial customers, and at a very early stage with a kind of concept like development partner or something, so that as long as you keep developing, you can kind of claim that there's these 3 or 4 partners that or customers that are already working with you, so that when you really go to market, you have already those 3 or 4 customers. And if that goes well, it will be a good showcase for the next ones that are going to be starting paying, and them, the development partners will start paying as well. So that will be my advice.
Starting slow, right? And yeah, talking about who to talk to, but not on the customer side, but more on the investor side, because we all know how hard it is to raise money, especially, it's already hard to raise money, but it's even harder for markets that are still unknown. It's more of a high risk, high reward thing. But how do you see the landscape in talking about, obviously, HTC Vive X is a firm believer, obviously. What about the overall landscape of investors and other VCs? As you have this discussed with plenty, what would you advise to go with? So who would you say yes if they want to invest in your company, and who would you say no, and why?
So regarding to the investors, I think there's a lot of them, right? I mean, a lot of options. And I think something very important is to make a good qualification of them. For instance, we saw the slide of Dave, which was like the different stages of the company, right? As a startup, your stage can be either at the moment of looking for business angels, or seed, or Series A, or Series B, and whatsoever. There's another very important variable, which is the type of investments that they do, right? Whether they are verticals in a specific industry or something else. So I think it's very important that you make the mix between what is your stage, what is the industry to which you propose a solution, and then look for the investors or the VCs or the business angels or whoever it is that are interested in that specific industry, matching the stage of the company in which you are. For instance, in my case, it's more relevant to apply to venture capitalists, which are sports tech, regardless they do, what technology they do, rather than I just go after VR focus VCs, right? So that's my point.
As a recommendation, I suggest accelerators. I mean, at the end, it's a question not to feel alone. It's a question to share with a lot of people and a lot of networking, and the accelerators are very good in connecting you guys with other investors. That's also my recommendation.
You're right. The most important is not the money, is the company and the value that the investors can give you. I was lucky with investors at Future Lighthouse because they are believers of the business, no? Almost all the investors that I talk with them wants to change my business model, want to change my vision, and one thing I believe that is you need to work in the things you love. So if the investors think a different thing about that, you need to look for another investors. But the value around the investment is the main value for you as founder of a new company.
Yes, I mean, two things, and I guess 2 tips. I mean, first of all, we were talking about B2B sales. I mean, I think a lot of founders, especially if you haven't fundraised before, it seems like some mystical process, and the VC's there. And I mean, remember, you're selling a product to them. They need to invest their money, or else they're not doing their job. So if you go in with that mindset, now if you think of it as a sales process, it's the same as any other. You need a pipeline. You can't just rely on 2 investors that you'd love. You need 20 investors, and one of those are going to fall out the bottom of the and actually end up investing. But then you also need to understand who the person is that you're selling to. So always research the firm, figure out what stage they do. I see way too many companies, trying to get the meeting with X firm. It's like, well, they only do tickets of 2 million up, or they want, 20% of your company, not 10% that you're offering, or whatever it is. So do your homework. Most VCs will blog, they'll tweet. Like, so many VCs are very transparent. Like, it's that they're easy to get hold of if you're confident enough to get hold of them. And usually within a firm, you need to, it's not just about which firm, it's also about which person. So it might be the young associate who has got nothing else to do but get excited about VR, who's going to champion you and bring you to a partner. Or it might be a partner there might be one person who's done a lot of gaming investments, therefore they're more prone to doing stuff in VR. So do your homework and understand who the people around the table are. The second tip is VR is a very hard concept. A lot of these VCs, if you go to VCs in the US, a lot of them have actually got equipment set up. Like, they've all bought the equipment, they've all tried it. If you go to Europe, actually, I would say probably half of the VCs, they'll all say they've tried VR, but it's usually bullshit. Like, they've done a Google Cardboard or whatever. So educate them a little bit. If they don't seem interested, don't spin your wheels. Move on to the next one. But one thing that we actually did at the Wave, which was very effective, is we had the product team build a special version of the Wave VR, and we would only pitch investors if they met us in the Wave. It's very hard to explain to an investor, hey, we're a social platform for dancing to music and taking VR drugs. It's like, what does that mean? So, get them into the product. Ideally, you can actually pitch them in the product. I think they even sign the term sheet in the product, which is a bit gimmicky. But yeah, and if it's not meeting them in VR, make sure that you can bring a demo to them which isn't going to make it look painful. Make that demo as simple and as easy as possible.
Yeah, actually, that was a quite good PR, talking about PR as well. Signing the term sheet in VR, I think, was a great educational tool for other VCs to really get into the space, right? And seeing VR as something they can use, but interesting. I was going to ask, what is the biggest lesson you've learned in the last 3 days in the industry? If there is something that you have to tell the rest, especially the ones starting right now, what is this single piece of advice that you would recommend doing or not doing?
In my case, it's clear, oversize, overpromise, and to have the foots on the earth, and be realistic with the market. When you work with technology or for a long time, you know that the technology have cycles and waves, not? And you need to know, like a surface, know where is the right moment to cut the wave, no? And that's the big lesson I learned in the past. Choose the right partners, choose the right smart investors, and work very hard in the product and in the business plan. And that's the keys to successful.
Easy said.
I could say that, especially in B2B, don't think that much on the technology, but think more on the problem that you want to solve, and focus in knowing your customer and how he interacts with that problem, and what solutions is he looking for today, even if they have nothing to do with VR or nothing to do with technology. Maybe they are doing that, in many other ways. And therefore, you have to also know the competitors in that space, in that solution, which might have nothing to do with VR again, right? So get to know that very well, and then build your competitive advantage out of that.
I would say what I said before is go step by step into solid milestones and try to be very disciplined with you on that. It's very easy to derive and to start doing a lot of things because somebody have curiosity on this, on the other. Is in the VR world, everybody has curiosity on things, and everybody's asking you to do this. So try to avoid that distractions and put your plan and do very, very concrete steps and don't jump into the next one until you really deliver on the first one.
Yeah, I would say top tip. Obviously, you have to apply for Vive X, right? That's all you need to do. No, I'd say one thing you need to, if you're a technical founder or you're building product, okay, that might be your number one skill. But if you're the founder, the CEO of the company, it's storytelling and sales, even if you're technical. I've met a lot of companies in the past few weeks, so we've been looking for Vive X. And I think it's being able to articulate what your company does in the first 20 seconds to get me interested is the most important thing. And that's not just to get investment, but it's also to hire people, it's to convince customers. So yeah, and I meet a lot of, because this is a very technical space, I meet a lot of technical kind of product focused founders. But I think they need to really kind of deliver get the person excited and do the storytelling piece first.
Communication, right, is super important. So maybe I will ask one last question. We're gonna open for questions to the public. So if you have any, you can start thinking of them. The last question is maybe a challenge that is quite recurring when I talk to people in the space, and is always the challenge working providing services versus working building a product. That looks like everyone who is ambitious, they are taking the way of building a product and raising money and going all in, as we mentioned, like go big or go home. But the reality of the market is sometimes, especially VR startups, they need to work on services to survive those different ways that we are seeing. And this is something that some VCs, when they look maybe at the accounts and they ask how much revenue have you make that year. Maybe they look at it and maybe the answer, yeah, we have $500,000 revenues or recurring revenues, but it doesn't mean anything for the product, just for the services, right? So what's your take in the sense of what's the right balance? Is it necessary? I'm saying yes, but until what point? And what would you recommend for founders that are bootstrapping, working on services with customers, and how to make the switch towards a product more than a service?
That's a very tough one. You said how to make the balance between both. I think the best balance is no balance, is either you do services or you do product. And in order to decide that, it's complex. There's benefits, and there's pros and cons in both. But once someone, a good friend of mine told me a very good definition of what's product versus services. Services is the yes to the customer, and product is the no to the customer. Why? Because services is all about adapting your technology to that customer, while product is all about building the product with your own roadmap and not putting in it anything that is just custom for one single customer, right? So that's a big decision to take and really focus in one of the two. And if you are in product, don't get into customizing for a single customer at all. And the way around, it applies as well.
I love it, the definition you gave. For me, it's very difficult to answer this question because I work for a product company, but I am a sales guy, so I want to say yes to the customer always. And to be honest, within my organization, this is the biggest debate we have every day. Shall we go into the yes or shall we go into the no? The benefit for me on the yes is not only about saying yes to the customer, that always is a nice thing, but it's to learn from the customer. It's not only about getting revenue from the customer, but to learn from that. And sometimes I say, we have to be very humble, and we need to learn a lot from our customers. But it's a kind of contradiction, because if you start doing that, it's very difficult to keep the focus into the product. So I still, after 2 years on this, I still have not the right solution.
No, yes, I agree 100% with Andreu, because it's your focus, the thing that are goals for you. And if you are a company service or you are a product company, there are two different worlds. As a service company, you don't need investment in the most of cases, because the revenue is enough for evolve the business that is in the most of cases linear, is grow with the size of the company. So product is different. It's exponential business model. So you need to think in advance to have a vision and what is the good balance between the two things if you want to have a company that decides to be a product company and a service company. I don't know. I try to do that. I think we well done the balance. We separate in the most of cases the team, and in the realistic way there are two different companies: the guys that make products and the guys that make services. Not so finally it's complicated to have.
That's a good solution.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing to say is one isn't better than the other one. Like, you know, if I talk to a service company and I say, oh, it's not quite right for Vive X, then it's almost like I'm saying it's not a worthy business. Like you can do one or the other, and that's just a choice. But I think Andreu actually, you know, summed it up very well. You need to make that choice and do one or the other. It's very difficult to do both. It might be that you started off as a service company, or you built something in your studio for a customer, and you suddenly realize, oh, well, we built this for Audi. Oh, wow, okay, yeah, there must be 100 other companies that would need this. But at that point, again, you have a decision to make. Are you going to spin that out, set it up as a new company, or, you know, do you just want to kind of keep servicing and kind of play it safe? So, yeah, I think it is a very challenging one, but one that gets asked all the time.
Let me provide an example in our case. Our case is a product company, definitely. But then when we start talking to clubs and academies, of course, they started saying, well, but, you know, if you can customize this and you can customize that, and that would be so good. And what we decided to do is look, since it seems it is a requirement of the customers, as he was saying, you want to listen to your customers, we decided, okay, so whatever we do, it has to be applicable to everyone, right? That's the philosophy of a product company. If I apply something, it's because it's useful for anyone that will use the product. Therefore, we decided to include into the roadmap of the product 3 specific customizations. The most obvious one, which is t-shirt, right? A second one, which is like covers of a number of pieces of the stadium, the stadium, and then a third one, which is more about a locker room, virtual locker room, also being able to put the shield in a couple of places and some covers. Therefore, now the standard product has customization to the customer limited to these 3 variables, right?
I would say one thing, actually, I've spoken to a few companies that have been in this position where they have, you know, made that flip. What is smart, and you need to be careful about limiting it, is ultimately having your customers fund your development. And I think that's slightly different to kind of servicing their needs or customizing. So for example, if I was a medical training company, if I can get my first company to, you know, it's quite expensive to build these simulations. It's not as easy as just spinning up a website. You know, this is many man hours going into building this. But if I can say, hey, look, we'll build this for you, you know, how about we split the cost, but, you know, I want to hang on to that and be able to resell it to, you know, the 2nd, 3rd, and 1,000th customer. So there's nothing wrong with, you know, asking for money from customers to do things, but as long as it's actually contributing to your overall product and not distracting you and taking away from it.
Which for that, it would be super important to have a look at IP protection, especially when you sign a contract with a customer, to always own the IP, which I believe then is the right thing to do, because it's putting the value back into your company, right? Interesting. So time for some questions. We are very happy to address them. Any questions on the public? It's pretty clear then. There was a lot of insights then. Nothing about investment.
I'm going to ask Andreu a self-serving question, and I'm going to say, how was Vive X for you? What was the best thing from going through the Vive X program? Or was it all terrible?
No. It was very good. It was very good. Actually, we got in the 2nd batch. Now the one you're doing now, it's a 4th, right? So it was in the 2nd batch. It was like 14 months ago. I think the best thing I got was actually one which was not in the 6. You know, you show the picture with the 6 type of values that you provide, but you mention it, which was family. So I really thought and felt, and still today, after a year of finalizing the official, 4 months at the time, I still feel it as a family. And I was from Shenzhen office, just because there was not even Tel Aviv at that time. So it happened to be Shenzhen. But still, I keep my relationship with Vive X director in China, Kevin, and also even with the HTC president in China, Albin Greilwin, and all the team beyond Vive X is always, we are always on WeChat doing all the stuff. Now, like today, even today, I had to ship by Focus to someone. I couldn't do it from here for a number of reasons. And the Joe from the Shenzhen office is sending it for me. This is, of course, a small detail, but it's a good example of family, I think. That's the most important. And then the second most important, that's the most important from a strategic perspective, is having the brand of HTC as one of my investors. When I talk to anyone and I say, well, my investors are this, and HTC, then, the HTC makes the impact. And that applies to potential other investors, applies to potential customers, and applies to everyone. And that branding part is key. Well, that's actually the reason why we joined at the time, and especially because our target market is China.
Interesting. Thank you for the insights. If there is any question, we are sure we can address them during the networking now. So we're going to be preparing the catering on the upper side of the auditorium, and then we're going to be running the live demos here. So we have the HTC Vive, Vive Focus, and so on. I thank you so much for your participation in this panel. I think it was a great insight from your experience. Thank you all, Dave, Roberto, Héctor, and Andreu. And as I mentioned, we are doing these events basically for connecting the community. For us, is the most important thing that we can do, organizing these events to exchange knowledge and exchange experiences. So take advantage during the networking. We are all going to be available here. Thank you all for coming. Enjoy the food, and talk to you soon then.